their parents took them, they chartered a yacht and took them shark fishing. And then on the 20th, they committed the murders. So it's just like, chartering a yacht and doing all this. And the boys they weren't left at home while their parents went out and spent all this money, just brazenly. They were included. They might have had a hard upbringing, but maybe that was his way of just keeping them centered, because he knew they were going to have an inheritance, but he wanted them to be more well-rounded individuals who would know how to manage the money correctly, which obviously they fucking didn't, because they burned through all of it. I mean, just 4 days after the murder, they dropped $15,000 or so on 3 Rolexes. And then after that, it was a Porsche. And then, hiring a tennis coach and all this.
Didn't they also
buy
buy
restaurants and all that?
Yeah, they bought Buffalo Wing restaurant, right?
They bought Chuck Spring Street Cafe and renamed it Mr. Buffalo's after they spent $550,000 on the restaurant. Yeah. Yep.
Well, funny thing that you mentioned that. Not that you mentioned that portion of it, but when I was listening to you talk about it, you did something interesting, Blake, and you probably didn't even know you were doing it, but it was actually a defense tactic during their case, is that you called them the boys. And, these guys were, 21 and 18 at the time, so they really weren't boys.
Well, yeah, they were 21 and 18, but still, if you're living at home, oftentimes, your parents still refer to you as boys. I mean, I was 21 and working at a college while I was going to school, and was only home 5 or 6 hours a day, and I was still considered a boy to them, even though I was working and bringing in an income and supporting people. So I guess it's just a matter of personal interpretation. But yes, the defense did that to their in their defense to try to make it more believable. In addition to dressing them up in these sweaters and trying to make them appear more childlike, and I think part of that was also to speak to the emotional and psychological trauma that they supposedly suffered at the hands of their parents. Maybe that made them feel like they were childlike. I've heard the same argument for other people. A lot of people say Michael Jackson was very childlike in a lot of ways, and I've heard that used to describe lots of other people. So I think it's just a matter of interpretation. But yes, the defense, their attorneys did that on purpose to try to get the jury to see them more in an innocent light, that they were victims of the situation rather than perpetrators of the murders. And I'm sure there was a little bit of victimization there. I grew up in a hard family. I got the shit beat out of me on a regular basis. I understand. It's no fucking fun. But I also didn't get to go shark fishing on a yacht and go to Princeton and all that shit either. So, there were some cons, but there were certainly some pros, because money was not an option. Money was no option. They could just spend whatever they wanted. I mean, he wasn't completely rich, like full on for the rest of his life. I think after it was all said and done, because he had some things leveraged out on the house, the father, he was probably only worth $5, $6, $7 million, something like that, after it was all said and done. And they burned through that shit real quick, like. So I think that was just the whole point of it. But yes, I did refer to them as boys, because when you're living, the 18-year-old is more a boy than the 21-year-old. But if you're living at home and you're, under your roof, if you're living in my roof, under my roof, it's my rules, and this whole standard, view of American home life for children, and all that, American culture. So I think that was just part of it. But yes, you're correct.
Okay, so let's get into the actual crime itself. You talked about the precursor there with the shotgun purchase and all those things. So, again, August 20th, 1989, you've got Lyle, 21, and Eric, 18. They kill their parents, and we'll get into that. But before I do, I just want to say I always get Lyle and Eric confused, because Eric looks older than Lyle. Eric's the one that was losing his hair, and he's bald now at the age of 50. Obviously, he's shaving his head now completely. But, whenever I see clips of these two, Eric looks older than Lyle to me. I don't know what it is, I know that sounds weird, but it's just something I picked up on.
Well, it could just be how their body reacts to aging, prison life, whatever other circumstances they're going for. Because I know when I saw, what was it? Was it Richard Speck? I was like, shit, man. Time had not been kind to him. That's for damn sure.
Well, I mean, he grew kids.
And
so.
well, that notwithstanding, Travis.
Just saying.
Yeah, but I mean, just aging, it does things to you. But yes, one of them looks, quite old, and the other one doesn't look as old. But the one that's bald, I've noticed, looks like he shaved off his eyebrows. So he's a little bit odd looking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's the one that I always thought was, the younger one, I always felt like he was more the stable one of the two, the one that was kind of the ringleader. But they always say that the older one was the ringleader, which makes more sense. But, I was just basing it on the fact that one looked older than the other one. I wasn't really thinking about their actual age. But anyway, so these murders, they occurred that evening in the den of the family's home in Beverly Hills at 722 North Elm Drive. Again, Beverly Hills being the context being the placement for this whole thing is just interesting. I mean, we've talked about California murders before, but we're talking more like urban stuff other than the Tate murders and things like that. We're talking about, like Richard Ramirez breaking into apartments and homes and things like that. There's some other cases we've obviously talked about in California, but this one, we're talking about an upscale neighborhood. You've got these neighbors that later reported hearing these loud bangs around 10 p.m., but they dismissed them, thinking it was local kids who were playing with firecrackers. And in August, that's totally believable, too. Because I don't know about you guys, my fucking redneck neighbors, they'll shoot off fireworks at any time of the year, especially in the summer. It's like they have them, just stockpiled from 4th of July. Just fucking stockpiled.
It happens, but what a very reasonable thing. I mean, obviously they thought that that's what it was, so that also,
especially in that neighborhood,
I mean, that also speaks to the neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, in that neighborhood, I highly doubt that they're going to be firing off fireworks. That's rather a rare occurrence, right? Unless you're near OJ's neighborhood, I guess.
Good call. Good point. Okay, so Jose and Kitty Menendez, they were sitting there on the couch when their sons, armed with shotguns, like Blake said earlier, they entered the den, and Jose was shot point blank in the back of the head with a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun. And he was pretty much fucked up and done from the start. I mean, Kitty, she had passed out on the couch, fallen asleep on the couch, She got woken up by the shots. She got up from the couch, and she was shot in the leg, and then this fucking shotgun blew up her leg. I mean, literally, it just, shattered her leg. She was shot in the leg as she was trying to run towards the hallway. And then and this is nasty to think about, just the whole course of events here. She slips on her own blood, she falls, which reminds me of what, Halloween 2, Blake, with Lance Guest?
Jimmy, yeah,
oh,
Jimmy, yeah.
That's what I thought of when I heard that. So she falls, as she's trying to get away, and they're on the floor, and this is where they're truly, truly sadistic. Whatever you believe about what their past is and what happened to them, by their dad, if anything, this is the part where you're like, I don't know, man. This is just the part where you just can't have any kind of sympathy for them. So while she's on the floor, she was shot several times in the arm, chest, and face. And she was left unrecognizable. I don't know who's seen the pictures of it, but it is fucking brutal. And both Jose and Kitty were shot in the kneecap, I think, post-mortem, in an attempt to make the murders appear related to organized crime. Basically, I think they had read that, mafia hits come with kneecappings. So they went with that approach. And for a while, that actually worked, right? Because we're talking March before they get arrested. March 11th, 1990 is when Lyle is picked up March 11th. I think Eric's picked up right before that. One of them was out of the country. They might have both been picked up the same day.
One was trying
it was
to
pretty
leave.
close.
They were trying. I think it was Lyle was arrested first. I think he was trying to leave California, and then I think that Eric surrendered later on.
Yeah, one of them surrendered on the 11th. Yeah, he was in Israel playing tennis, as you do when you kill your parents.
That's right. I wouldn't have fucking come back. I don't know about you, but I think they were a little overconfident about their case, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think so too. They were young. inexperienced killers. I mean, it's successful. Obviously, they killed their parents, but you know, they had no plan for what the course of their life was going to be afterwards. You know,
but it was completely premeditated. I mean, they went like 100 miles away to buy the shotgun, right?
Right, and obviously, I mean, I'm not driving 100 miles anywhere. Have you seen gas lately? Jesus Christ!
Back in '89, it was cheaper, but.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is towards the end of the 80s, so gas was okay. We didn't have a gas crisis going on then. We were good.
Yeah, but I mean, they did go 100 miles, you know.
I mean, obviously they did that to make it a little bit so that nobody would notice anyone purchasing it, right? So they obviously went out of town to do it, but you know, they still had receipts, so they really weren't that bright about it, but. You know, it was easy to track for the police when they actually hunted everything down.
Well, let's kind of continue the course of events here because, you know, I said earlier that neighbors reported hearing, you know, what they thought was gunshots, but, you know, they assumed it was firecrackers around 10. Well, at 11:47, which tells me that the boys, see, got me too. They probably talked about what happened. They came up with a plan, and this is what they did. At 11:04, and I know this because I know this just based on logic, but they also talked a little bit about how they assumed with them firing off guns loudly in the middle of the night that somebody would have called the police, and nobody ever did. Nobody ever came. So at 11:47 p.m., when they get home, which I don't know how that could fucking be because they weren't actually gone. Well, I guess they did go to the movies, but they came back. Anyway, Lyle telephoned 911. And he's crying. He's like, somebody killed my parents. And I don't know if you guys have heard the 911 call. It's pretty believable overall. You know what I mean? Like, just how hysterical he sounded. And, you know, they told the police. You never heard it?
No, I heard them. Yeah. It seemed pretty believable. And so when he went into the trial and saying, you know, child molestation and pedophilia and stuff, you sort of agreed. Like, you know, you listen to it sort of, okay, that kind of makes sense. But then as all the evidence came out, it didn't make any sense at all. So,
which tells you a little bit more about their mentality, I think. You know, and, you know, so you get this, they call the police and they you know, they tell them they've been to the movie theater watching Batman at the time of the crime. And afterwards, they said they went to the annual Taste of LA festival at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. And here's where things go south for fucking police officers, at least for the time being. They fuck up here. Because despite being considered suspects, I mean, they're the only ones around. There's no other trace of anybody else. The police didn't order the brothers to undergo gunshot residue tests to learn whether they had recently used a firearm. And because they're so hysterical, they're so upset, they're just like, yeah, you just go ahead. You just go ahead. And the police fucked up here. And it cost them, you know, 7 months out of this case. But, you know, at least they didn't kill anybody else because they were really fucking hated themselves had they done that, you know, if they were like the type that were going to go after somebody else after this. And, you know, they didn't have much evidence here, so they kind of didn't really look into the brothers more thoroughly. I mean, obviously they were on the radar, but they didn't go after them for a while. And so now in the months after the murders, you got the brothers, and Blake talked about this heavily. They're spending this money lavishly that they've got. I don't know if it's in a trust. I know they've got, you know, they're the ones that are the inheritance, and, you know, they're adding to the investigators' suspicions that they were involved with their parents' deaths, which I don't know why you would want to put yourself on the radar. That just seems short-sighted. Like, one of them bought, and I guess I'll get into this, but one of them bought a Rolex for the funeral, and they're just buying expensive shit. Like, Lyle bought an expensive Rolex watch, a Porsche Carrera, and Chuck's Spring Street Cafe, a Buffalo Wing restaurant in Princeton, which I think Blake had also talked about. And then Eric hired a full-time tennis coach and competed in a series of pro tournaments. And where? Israel, just like you said. And so they left the North Elm Drive mansion unoccupied. You know, they decided to live in adjoining condos at nearby Marina del Rey, also a rich neighborhood. And they drove around Los Angeles in their late mother's Mercedes-Benz convertible. You know, they dined expensively. They went overseas trips to the Caribbean and to London. And it's estimated, and this is fucked, that Lyle and Eric spent $700,000 in the months between the murders and their arrests.